From the studios of TV7 in Jerusalem, shalom to all our viewers around the globe. We are here with another episode of Middle East Review, and as usual with me is Eran Lerman, Colonel in Reserve in Israeli Intelligence, and Doctor, and many other titles that the show will be too short to enumerate. But with the Middle East, again, there's never a dull moment. I think we will be remiss if not starting with this whirlwind visit of President Trump, the President of the United States, in the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the Emirates, and bypassing Israel. So with this, I would have a very specific question to you, Eran.
Yeah.
How would you sum up the visit of Trump in the Middle East?
Well, first of all, it's transformative. It's I think that's in a word. It rearranges aspects of the U.S. policy in the region. It rearranges aspects of the Israeli-American relationship. It raises certain very serious questions, and finally, it should all be seen in the context of the most momentous decision that the administration will have to make in the coming weeks, literally, namely what to do about the Iranian negotiations, which clearly the entire issue is informed by his interaction with the Gulf states, which are the key economic, transactional interests of the United States.
And they would have a conflicting interest here with Israel because they are very vulnerable when it comes to their oil energy infrastructure, which Iran makes no secret about its intent to attack it if it is attacked.
True enough. At the same time, they are also terrified about the proposition of having to live in a region dominated by Iran as a military nuclear power. So they have their own choices to make. They need to be quite confident about the American willingness and ability to help and protect them in such a situation. And they have just built a huge American interest in the future of the relationship to the tune of something like $2 trillion in promise.
Combined with all
three in terms of acquisition and from an investment in the American industries, which of course is the one overriding focus of Trump's attention. What he portrayed to us is an America that has gone entirely transactional, or in the terms of the old theories of economics, mercantilist policy, reminiscent of the European powers 300 years ago. Or the days of the Opium Wars and the gunboat diplomacy. This was, of course, not coerced, but suggested to these countries that the mutual interest lies in these huge transactional relations. Not all of this can be easily swallowed from an Israeli perspective. I think the most glaring problem from our point of view, of course, there's a delicate issue also in Israel in terms of how far has Qatari influence gone within the halls of power in Israel, the corridors of power, but the audacity of making an offer to the President of the United States of a gift of $400 million. I used to. When I worked in the government, if you got a flower vase from somebody, you had to report it, and in all likelihood it would have gone.
As former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon said, that anything, he would accept anything which is less than $5.
$5, yes.
That was the threshold.
And as ambassador, you know how these things, and Washington used to be very, very strict on these things, and all of a sudden, somebody makes the rules disappear. I'm not sure, by the way, he'll take it. I think it's a gift. Somebody called it a gift too far. which may even sour up a lot of people in Washington on Qatar.
Sure.
Because
even Republicans, even supporters of the president were aghast by just the notion that here the major superpower of the world has to get a dole, has to get some kind of a gift from a country like Qatar.
Which is very ambivalent about its position on terrorism, to put it mildly. And then you talk about a huge transactional framework of $1.2 trillion or whatever. You always wonder how much of this was going to actually be translated into actual investment. But this is a country that has financed terrorism and subversion across the region, which is deeply involved in support for the
Muslim. About Qatar.
The Qataris specifically.
For all of us to understand, yes.
They have supported the Muslim Brotherhood subversion in Egypt and elsewhere. They are deeply committed to Hamas, and the Hamas leadership in exile works from Qatar. They used to call it the gas station with a radio or with a TV antenna, and it's a joke, but it's not so funny. Al Jazeera is the most powerful influence on many in the Arab world, in Arabic, not the milquetoast English version.
Sure.
And
at some points it was even banned by Egypt or other Muslim countries, not just Israel or other Arab countries, because it was subversive.
Even the PA
exactly
threw them out at some point. Because of its powerful pro-Islamist subversive message. So for all of and then to lavish so much love and attention upon the Qataris at this situation raises certain questions about judgment and about long-term versus.
So let's talk about long-term. When it comes to Saudi Arabia, so we have $142 billion of arms deal that the United States has committed to sell to Saudi Arabia, $600 billion of Saudi money invested in the United States, which could also be in very, very, I would say, cutting-edge technology and high-tech, like AI and
the Qataris are getting drone technology and anti-drone technology. All of this, you wonder
now,
where it will go.
From us, there are two issues. First of all, the United States have always been committed to the qualitative edge, QME.
The QME,
qualitative military edge of Israel over any and all of the adversaries in the region. There is even a bill, more than
2008,
one.
It was promulgated as the law of the land. It's no longer just a sentiment of the president as it was in Reagan's day.
So how do, first of all, are all those deals with Qatar and with Saudi Arabia are compromising the qualitative military edge of Israel, first. And secondly, with all these political intertwinings, political transactional policies, if you would, as you called it, would that also could make a wedge, a Gulf wedge by all these countries, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, between Israel and the United States?
Well, I think there are three issues which should really trouble the Israeli leadership. One is what you've just mentioned, the sheer volume of arms transfers to the Gulf, and the increasingly problematic question of how to maintain the QME, how to sustain Israel's edge when this kind of money cannot be, mutually spent also on Israel. Israel does not have these resources, and the United States aid package is increasingly becoming, let's say, obsolete in some ways. We need a different relationship to be structured specifically as we go in the next year or so, 2 years at most, into the negotiations over the next 10-year package with the Americans. How to structure this, how to ensure that the most relevant technologies are still going to Israel in a way that balances out this immense flow of arms to Arab countries, no matter how friendly, in the case of the UAE, or half friendly in the case of Saudi Arabia, or actively problematic like Qatar. We need to resolve this, and it's going to be an extremely difficult thing to do.
Yeah. We know in the Middle East, nothing lasts forever, not even for a short while, because we are all, standing here on shifting sands, with shifting alliances on the one hand, but also with all these countries that we have mentioned. They're all these monarchies, Islamic monarchies. We know also that we cannot, or they cannot guarantee their survival forever. And if there is, God forbid, a coup and some other elements take power, including Islamist elements, and we know that the Iranian subversion would like actually to turn, whether it's Oman or Bahrain or all those countries, including Saudi Arabia, into Shiite-dominated countries. So this is two risks that we
need to
face,
take into
external
account.
one and internal one from their point of view.
So basically, as I said, the solution probably no longer lies in simply increasing the aid package to Israel. It needs to lie in the field of sustaining technological superiorities and specific aspects of maintaining the Israeli edge, and doing it, by the way, in a manner that also benefits the American industry. So I am increasingly. The Prime Minister mentioned this as a flying thought, but I recently wrote about this at the Jerusalem Institute of Strategy and Security. Israel should start thinking about sustaining the QME commitment, but shifting the manner of its execution from the model of an aid package to the model of deeply organized partnership with the cutting-edge industries between the cutting-edge industries of Israel and the United States.
And here we do have an edge, because while in the Gulf countries, they need to actually bring to them cutting-edge technology, whereas in Israel, we benefit. Prepare, here you create cutting-edge technology. So
and sadly, we benefit from also having to use them and learn from the usage in the battlefield.
But yes, this ensures that Israel will continue to be a valued asset for the United States. And we have not talked, of course, about the shared values, which may be a lesser issue for this presidency.
That's one aspect. Second is the increasingly obvious push by all three Arab partners, with nuances, obviously. Qatar supports Hamas. The Saudis probably are closer to the Egyptian and Emirati version of a solution that would replace Hamas. The Emiratis trust the Palestinian Authority much less than the Saudis or the Egyptians. The long and the short of it, all of them are pushing for the end of the war, and Israel finds itself increasingly on a shaky footing. We have problems with the Europeans, but we also have a problem with the Trump administration on specific issues, such as humanitarian supply, and such as the need to have a coherent vision for the future. With all due respect to what Trump said earlier, the idea of simply removing the Gazans from Gaza is at the realm of sheer fantasy. And if
we call it DOA, dead on arrival.
And if you do manage to get some of the best minds in Gaza to resettle in the West, you're only making the place even less viable down the road. But the mass of Gazans would stay.
Although according to different surveys, public opinion polls, at least 52%, sometimes 47%, 50% of Gazans would like to leave Gaza behind them.
But who would take them?
Exactly, that's a problem.
And even then, it will not be a solution.
Of course.
So the whole idea that a lot of Israelis fancy or fantasize about, ultimately, we need to come back to reality. And we saw this in the Israeli decision to expedite humanitarian aid against the sentiments of many in the governing coalition, because simply we cannot stand against the world on matters of extreme importance to our value system, to our shared value system, but also to the practical realities on the ground.
And of course, the change of mind of president is the most important and influential on Israeli policy of changing its position.
We cannot entirely ignore Europe, which is the destination of a huge part of Israeli exports.
But with Europe, yes. With Europe, we're less dependent on Europe, if at all. And for making a decision by the European Union, you need a consensus, as long as you have countries like Hungary that can stop them. But this is
But when the wind is blowing from the key Gulf states in a certain direction, it becomes much more complicated.
Yeah, but the
third problematic aspect of the entire situation is historically it used to be very clear to all players in the region and well beyond the region that Israel has influence and leverage in Washington. And in many, many cases, from the Moroccans to some of the Gulf states and African countries, Asian, the notion was that if you want to open doors in Washington, you need to go through Israel or at least with Israel.
Right.
And now the manner in which Israel was sidelined undermines this very important intangible aspect of Israel's international standing.
Absolutely. So let's say that there were some challenges for Israel's, I would say, political standing here. It's quite interesting because militarily, following the 7th of October and what unfolded, we have really become much more deterring to anyone. We have pretty much crushed the Shia Crescent. We brought about a major change in Lebanon, in Syria, and maybe even...
We had a role in bringing about
Absolutely. But on the other hand, as you mentioned, politically, I'm not sure Israel took advantage of all those military advantages to translate it and to shift them into political advantages. And part of the reason is the very unique conduct, political and foreign policy conduct of President Trump. Just as he walked into the Oval Office, not too long ago, he talked about opening to rain hell over
the gates of hell.
The gates of hell over Gaza if they do not release the hostages. Now he's saying they need food, they need humanitarian aid, and we need to help them. So there is a complete change, and I hope the Israeli government will adapt.
Well, clearly the decision that the cabinet took, or the prime minister shoved through cabinet without a vote, to expedite the implementation of humanitarian aid, and down the road, the understandings reached with the American administration would enable significant American NGOs to do the work in 4 different centers in Gaza, are all indicative of this need to be attentive to the new considerations that the president in Washington has to take into account. Yeah. But above all, as I said in the beginning, the most important aspect of the entire trip is the one less salient, not the transactional, from an Israeli point of view, not a transactional relationship with the Gulf states, but the unsettled question as yet of the Iranian nuclear project, the position of the United States at the negotiating table. The Iranians have consented to negotiations that they blatantly refused to accept before. They are talking directly at the level of Arakchi and Wetkoff. Wetkoff is also, in and of himself, a unique phenomenon, a real estate buddy of and Gulf buddy of the president, who all of a sudden becomes the premier Kissinger figure negotiating around the globe.
Negotiator in chief, whether it's with Russia and Ukraine, whether it's with Iran, whether it's with Gaza, everything.
And the gaps between the American position and the Iranian position are not only significant, they seem to have grown after the third round of fourth round of.
And here, Iran, this is the question: is where will the Americans draw the red line? We thought in the beginning, or before Trump went into office, there was an understanding with his people, with himself, that the only way to stop the Iranians' illegal nuclear activities is to emulate the Libyan model. Libyan model, when Gaddafi was caught red-handed in trying to build nuclear capabilities, he was actually forced, basically, to not only dismantle, but to ship out of Libya the entire infrastructure. Nothing was left. And this was the idea that Israel thought to do with Iran.
That's why I'm a bit nervous about calling it the Libyan model, because it reminds people also of the fact that Gaddafi ended up dying an ugly death. And therefore, some would say, wait. Maybe this is not a very good idea from the point of view of the Iranian regime to leave themselves without an insurance.
But we don't need to take into consideration their interests.
Yeah, but the administration seemed to be drifting in a different direction, which sounded closer to the JCPOA model.
Which allowed Iran to enrich up to 3.67 for civilian use. And here there is another issue, Iran. If the United States is going to allow Saudi Arabia to enrich uranium for civilian, how can they bar Iran not doing that? So this is another complication into the issue.
So now, this is in the fluctuations of the American position. More recently, we've heard again and again the message that Iran does not need an independent enrichment capability.
Because it has so much
it has energy
and fuels,
but if it wants energy, nuclear energy, it can sustain its civilian nuclear facilities based on the supply of the relevant fissile material. Lower rich uranium for the power for Bushehr, for example, from outside. This is a gap that may not close, and if it does not, we are going to face very momentous decisions about American action or Israeli action backed by America. And all of this when Washington seems to be divided right down the middle. Official Washington, Trump administration, divided right down the middle between latter-day isolationists of a sort.
Led by the vice president.
Presumably led by Vice President Vance. And more globalist or activist interpreters of the American role in world affairs.
Let's say, Secretary of State Rubio.
Well, it's all a matter of speculation because we don't really know what's happening behind closed doors. But there's a clear sense that there is a deep division. And as I noted on the 8th of May, when we celebrated the 80th anniversary of VE Day, Israel can no more be neutral in this debate than Britain in 2025 than Britain could be in 1940. Mm-hmm. It is a fateful question of American orientation towards world affairs generally, not just Israel. Sure. So all of this makes the trip and its implications and its complications an immense issue. Meanwhile, here in Israel, the government is still leaving open the possibility of a negotiated ceasefire with the release of hostages. After the Trump administration achieved the release of one American, which left a lot of Israelis extremely glad for this young man who was tortured and abused. but also extremely troubled by the idea that an American passport got him out while 20 Israeli hostages are still held alive, and 38 others are still held. Israelis and foreigners are still held. The bodies are still held in Gaza, and all of this created a complex situation in which Israel is pushing militarily deeper and deeper into Gaza, but in a manner that enables the IDF at any moment to say, okay, we have a breakthrough on the hostages, we can stop.
Right. So here I would say, to sum up, with the visit, we have a lot of open issues. Of course, when it comes to Israel, how we regain our, let's say, status of the best and the most dependable ally of the United States in the region. And I think this can be done over time.
We did not even mention his lifting of sanctions on Syria and his meeting with Ahmed al-Shara.
Of course.
But here intelligent Israeli diplomacy can actually utilize this to build a complex relationship with Syria. Militarily, we're still in, but politically, we have channels of communication.
So we have a challenge to actually transform our military gains, whether it's in Syria, Lebanon, anywhere else in the region, in Gaza, of course, into some political, I would say, assets. This is something that certainly can be done. I believe that the true partnership between Israel and Western country and most of the United States is strong as ever. However, we will have to look and watch what is going Iran to do, what is going to be the solution in Gaza. Many other issues that we did not have a chance to discuss, of course, Turkey, Syria, Sudan, Chad, and Libya, everything there is also in very tumultuous
we'll be
situation.
Wiser in a month.
So we'll keep this for the next show. And thank you so much for our viewers from Jerusalem, TV7 studio. I am Danny Ayalon, and with me, Eran Lerman, as usual.